folks? Welcome back to another episode of 13 on the 13th. Yes, we are coming to the close of 2024, and what a great year it has been, so I thought it'd be all the more appropriate to discuss and honor some of the greatest endings of the horror genre. You know, it is true that a great ending can save an otherwise bland or even a bad film, so let's check them out. Now, before we move on, obviously, we are talking about endings here, so I don't think I have to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Spoiler warning for everything to come. So if you want to check out what films are here, I'll put a description in the link below so you're not blindsided. And once again, spoiler warning. So let's not waste any time. Let's just get right into it. These are 13 great horror endings.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh? An exorcism. A little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Clear your mind knows what scares you. It has from the very beginning.
You know, the only thing that matters is the ending.
Enough said, right? Moving on. No, really, I think Secret Window has much more staying power than we give it credit for. Yes, it is a Stephen King adaptation, complete with all the familiar tropes for a nice, balanced diet of horror. And honestly, one of my favorite Johnny Depp performances. Hot on the Pirates of the Caribbean craze at the time, Secret Window comes off as kind of a rest stop from the Disney run. Mort Rainey certainly doesn't have the manic energy of Jack Sparrow. Still, I'm sure I'm not the only one who had to endure all the ladies swooning over this man at the height of his deftness. I mean, hell, even I have to admit the man was gorgeous. However, one of the few criticisms I have is I never really bought Johnny Depp as a writer.
I'm open to suggestions.
Why is this a must-have for every Stephen King story? And the telltale signs are a bit obvious once you are able to go back and see it a second time and you're aware of what's going on. Nevertheless, it is an ending riddled with tension, especially if you're coming into the movie unfamiliar with the story itself. It's all right there under the sheriff's nose, and the look on Mort's face says it all. You have to ask yourself, though, who are we looking at here? Is this Mort, or is this Shooter? Jason Goes to Hell, New Line's newest acquisition of the time, and it definitely shows. An interesting approach to have a Jason movie with very little Jason Voorhees, wouldn't you say? You will note that it's not titled Friday the 13th as it usually should be, as there was some sort of licensing issue at the time. It was certainly a different take, to say the least, and in spite of all this, I still kinda liked it.
Blasphemer!
However, it's no secret, even back then, what this movie was really about. With the house that Freddy built now having the rights to Jason could only mean one thing.
I am soaking wet right now.
Yeah, that's how we all felt. Actually, Part 7, A New Blood, was supposed to be the original Clash of the Horror Titans, but due to studio disagreements, we got Jason versus Discount Carrie instead. But now, it was right there on screen, and there was no backing out. The hype was real. Jason Goes to Hell was nothing more than an overstuffed appetizer for the film to come. And even still, we had to wait 10 more years to get it, and even endure a journey to space with Jason. Let's be honest, it was worth the wait, though. And a fun fact, it was actually Kane Hodder's arm standing in for Freddy here. I still feel the rush every time, even to this day. The movie may be up for debate, but nobody can deny an ending like this. The Shining. Yes, we have been here before, and for good reason. The Shining is no doubt one of the more layered films of the genre where every frame is filled with some kind of meaning. While on the surface, Jack's demise and his failed attempt to kill his family is horrific enough, it is merely a mortal death. What follows is the haunting suggestion that Jack has been absorbed by the hotel, frozen in time with the rest of the trapped souls that the Overlook has claimed. We watch Jack's slow descent into madness begin almost immediately after they arrive, culminating to the devilish final image of Jack posing as Baphomet here. Is this to suggest he's the one leading, or is he calling for more to follow him? Again, everything is up for debate. Every piece of this film can be dissected and analyzed to the nth degree, and we still wouldn't have all the answers. Why it has endured all these years is probably because it still holds wonder for us all. Indeed, way deeper than an axe-wielding crazy man with cabin fever. And that final lullaby, Midnight, the Stars, and You, couldn't be more hypnotic. The siren's song, perhaps, calling Jack further into the hell that is the Overlook, or perhaps calling him back. Now, I really couldn't decide one way or another, so we're getting the daily double here. Ambiguity versus catharsis. I'd love to hear which one you prefer. The original spends the runtime building Myers up as this supernatural force no one can really understand. Between Dr. Loomis's rantings and the presence Michael Myers brings lets us know that Myers isn't what he appears to be.
This isn't a man.
And at the time, we really hadn't seen something like this. Typical by today's standards, sure, but in 1978, to see a man vanish into ether after being shot 6 times and fallen flat to the ground from 2 stories above was evident enough. Michael Myers is the boogeyman.
As a matter of fact, it was.
It left a sense of dread in all of us to hear the breathing from every corner of every house in every yard, indicating to us that the shape could be anywhere or everywhere. Fast forward 20 years, and the ambiguity has been replaced with agenda. Myers is after Laurie Strode, plain and simple. By now it's become a standard slasher, playing by the typical rules, and even borrowing the score from Scream from time to time. Now, I know this movie gets a lot of criticism for the music, the mask, the portrayal of Myers, why it's in California, how did Myers know where to find Laurie, etc., but I didn't think it was that bad. Yeah, it has its flaws, no doubt, but no one can argue with the last 20 or so minutes. The ending, I feel, really kicks off with one of the best moments of the entire franchise to date. Yeah, it still gives me goosebumps. A confrontation 20 years in the making where Laurie finally gets to face her monster. I really don't like how we can see his eyes so clearly. This is a big fault in my opinion, but nothing can be more fitting and definitive. This is where it ended.
Who are you?
We're the Monster Squad.
Now we're talking. An awesome cult classic. I'm sure you agree. One that looks to be making a slow but well-deserved resurgence. It is a clashing of the most classic Universal monsters, disagreements notwithstanding, which is why we get Gillman instead of the creature from the Black Lagoon, why Frankenstein has no bolts in his neck, and a few other minor detail changes. Dracula, Wolfman, the Mummy, and of course the Invisible Man is played by himself. It's such a fun movie, and ridiculous up to and including the end, which has to be the most implausible thing I've ever seen. One crayon-written note was enough to garner a military response to, and I quote, "Monsters! That's all you need apparently. Send in the troops." No questions asked. None but a paper business card handed to the general is all you get. It's just a riot to watch. It gets me every time. How appropriate for number 6, wouldn't you say? Yeah, you can't talk endings without a little Shyamalan getting in the mix here. Often criticized for his endings, I'm looking at you, Glass. No one can argue against The Sixth Sense being one of the best twists to ever strike audiences at the time, perhaps ever. Even still, you'll occasionally run into someone who has to feel superior by saying, "Oh yeah, I knew that all along. I saw that coming a mile away."
Oh, shit!
This was one of the best conclusions to a story that required a second, third, X number of viewings thereafter to catch all the minute details, and believe me, there were plenty. For a time, it was regarded as a sin to speak of the ending around those who hadn't seen it yet, and understandably so. Yes, in retrospect, it was very apparent to see that Bruce Willis was dead. Hey, I warned you several times, don't blame me. I mean, ask anyone if you weren't around during its release what the feeling was in the air. In 1999, the internet wasn't what it is today. The secret was still able to be contained for a long enough period of time, and a movie like this wouldn't stand a chance these days. So we can be grateful for the timing there. It did, however, set quite a high bar for Shyamalan that some might argue has yet to be topped. I mean, what do you think? Let us know what your favorite M. Night movie is down below. Speaking of twist endings, this one, I have to admit, made me feel a bit clueless. A look back will reveal a not-so-groundbreaking film, not taking anything away from the efforts put forward on such a minute budget. For $1.2 million, certainly a meager amount by filming standard, it wasn't really a bad end product, especially when you consider the talent involved. You got Carrie Elwes, Danny Glover, Monica Potter, Donnie Wahlberg, among others. Of course, Tobin Bell, but I'd argue he didn't really begin to command big money until after this movie. Of course, there's much to be desired from some of the performances. I feel the big contributing factors to its success would be the shock value, arguably giving rise to the subgenre of torture porn. Yes, many imitators sprouted from this one film, doing what they could to get their piece of the pie, and there was plenty to go around. Aside from that, the ending was shocking, to be fair. Once again, ask anyone who was around at the time. The same kind of code of silence was held for those who hadn't seen this. Okay, so listen, I gotta tell you, the guy, he cuts off his own foot, and then he crawls out, right? So we're thinking, where's the guy that did all this stuff? All of a sudden, the guy in the middle of the room who we thought was dead, he had... Sometimes you can get away with plot holes and bad acting if the ending is eye-popping enough, and in my opinion, that's what happened here. A trend they tried to repeat with reduced success with each entry thereafter. They caught lightning in a bottle once, but could never truly replicate that feeling. I know it has its devout fan base, and truthfully, I used to be one, but like most franchises, the first one will always be the best. From the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock's leading title, has been regarded as a foundational block of the genre. One of the first delvings into the mind of a deranged killer, Norman Bates has become synonymous with insanity. Owning some of the most recognizable moments in horror, even those who haven't seen the film still mimic the screeching tone when bringing the phantom knife down on someone. And let's be honest, there's a part of you, even the smallest part, that still quivers whenever you get in the shower, am I right? Of course, Jason had to come along and one-up Anthony Perkins. I see your knife and raise you a crushed skull. Norman Bates is a pivotal character in the annals of horror. Nothing seems out of place on the surface. A little odd, sure, but nothing to raise an alarm about. Man-child with a mommy complex, but when we learn of the goings-on, it's interesting to see the madness taking place in real time, listening to his inner demon as she spoke to him. Sure, this is a relatively tame movie by today's standards, but it's one that all fans must pay respect to at some point. Myself, guilty as charged, I remember being bored when I was younger, unable to fully appreciate the subtleties of such a well-told story. We might not hear too much about Norman Bates next to the big baddies like Freddy, Jason, and such, but he's the unassuming one lurking in plain sight. You know what they say, it's the quiet ones you gotta watch. The Blair Witch Project. Yes, another one we have visited in the past. One of these days I'm going to do a full-on review of this film, but for now we're going to stick to the matter at hand. I don't get much sway in terms of how people feel about this one. They either love it or hate it, and I, for one, am in the former group. I love this movie. Now, at the time, I had bought the story they were selling hook, line, and sinker, which, truthfully, I think gave me and everyone else like me the true experience of what they were going for. People often mock me, "Oh, you believe that? Say what you want," and I may be a bit gullible, but that was the point of the marketing, and it worked for so many. We get spoon-fed bits and pieces of the situation and the mythos layered therein, but never a clear understanding of what's going on. Easily written off, as the characters do, but once things start going bump in the night, the security blanket is slowly pulled away. We're left wondering how much of this story is real until we watch the scene play out as it was told earlier. It leaves you lost to time and nature. Is it a ghost? The witch? Rustin Parr? Something else we're not familiar with? It's a perfect example of less is more. As I started this video by saying, I love an open ending, and we are certainly left with more questions than answers here. It's what keeps the film alive for me and for so many more, even after all these years. Maybe one of the last true cult classic films. Here we are with Jaws. Now this is one of those endings that gets me in a weird way, and I'm curious if any of you feel the same. It's the only movie I can think of where I actually enjoy watching the credits. And for me, that's easy to understand why, as it consists of panorama shots of the beach, which is enough for me to sit and take in the view. But it was a strange feeling back then until I listened to the behind-the-scenes tellings from Richard Dreyfuss.
There was applause at the end of the movie. The movie ends, we're swimming away, it says the end, and they went crackers. Everyone went berserk. And then they sat, and they watched all of the credits. Every last one of them. And nobody moved. And then they applauded again.
It really is a soft landing where you really get the sensation of finally being able to catch your breath. The last few lines feeling almost like a short poem. I don't need to say too much about the film itself. It's widely regarded as a genuine classic on all fronts. However, I will be the one to criticize this in saying that it was accidentally so, in my opinion. Many give the film this praise on the fact of not showing the shark until about an hour in, giving the suspense time to build. This is not what Spielberg had in mind. It was mechanical issues with the shark that forced them to hold off. A lot of people overlook this note, but really, if that were the case, how different would the film actually look? Who knows? It's certainly better that we don't at this point. It's beautiful as is, and a very poetic end, as I've said. Quint goes out like his mirror of Captain Ahab. Hooper survives. The island is safe once again as our heroes swim to shore. I can't complain, and even to this day I watch the credits every single time. It's short and sweet. Give it a try if you haven't already, and just take in the view and the serene music that it lit you off with. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the more iconic ending images anyone might bring up about horror. The unbroken shot of Leatherface flailing away in a manic fit, backed by the rising hot Texan sun, leaves you gassed out and choking on your own breath. It's the culmination of a run-on sequence that begins with Sally escaping her hellacious night essentially into an unknown world. The tension really gears up once we hear the rev of the chainsaw, which doesn't really leave us until the madness is cut to black. There's no real reprieve, no assurance of safety. I can only imagine what this was like to see firsthand in theaters upon its release. One thing I think would be an interesting take would be to see some kind of on-stage adaptation. How would that feel to be without the veil of safety of a TV screen? No separation of worlds, nothing between you and the saw. Yikes! Robert Englund has gone on to say that this is one of his favorite endings, and really, if you get an accommodation from Freddy Krueger himself, that's really saying something. It's sharp, it's visceral, and one of the few endings of equal relief and terror. Sure, Sally got away, but so did Leatherface. How safe do you really feel tonight? Another Tobe Hooper film. Poltergeist is great in that it gets you with something of a fake-out ending.
This house is clean.
Now, generally when we learn more about what's going on, it tends to dilute the effect. Not so the case here, especially once you learn of what the cast actually went through. Yes, there is indeed a lot of history behind the film and its cast. It was laden with travesty and tragedy, both on screen and off, which brings us to the one disturbing note, if you haven't heard of it yet, was these are actually human skeletons in the pool. Now that's commitment to the craft.
You gotta keep it real. Looks like you got a little too real there.
There's more than enough room for an ethics debate here, but that's a conversation for another time. This film is filled to the brim with memorable quotes and moments with a superb cast. They all deserve massive praise. As I mentioned, there was a lot of real-world tragedy that befell those on and off screen. That being said, Poltergeist does join the unfortunate ranks of one of the more cursed movies ever put into production, along with The Omen, The Exorcist, and The Atuk, the latter of which we will be taking a deeper dive into soon, so keep an eye out for that. For the story alone, it's no surprise what befalls this family, though given the situation, I can't help but wonder why only their house. Sure, because of Carol Ann, it's who the whole film revolves around, but having developed a whole housing community upon an old cemetery land, there's a lot more people to be punished here, don't you think?
You only move the headstones!
That's always been one of my favorite deliveries of all time. It might be wise to look up the history of your house before you come home and find it sucked up by the dead. Okay, I promise this is not because of the date. What was meant to be a last-minute jump scare for the audience turned out to be so much more. Still gets me every time, no matter how prepared I am. Ari Lehman was a trooper kid for this stunt, waiting in the freezing water for some time until being given the green light to strike. Looking back, were it not for this off-the-cuff idea, we may never have known who Jason Voorhees really was, and missed out on some of the genre's most memorable moments. It's hard to imagine in retrospect how this wasn't meant to be a ready-made open end for the sequel. Honestly, it's also a rare treat to be able to show this to someone who is completely in the dark, and thankfully, I have had such a pleasure more than once. It's so sweet to catch the true surprise. You never know what kind of tragedy lies at the bottom of your lake. And whatever it may be, it might not be dead.
And he's still there, still there, still there, still there.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us here and checking out the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Before we go, I want to wish everyone out there a very happy, safe, and wonderful holiday season, as well as a great new year. Let's start 2025 on the right foot, shall we? And lastly, of course, if you haven't hit it yet, please hit the like and subscribe button and share this with your friends and everyone you know. All the support goes a very long way, so I want to thank you all once again for being here and checking us out and supporting us along the way. We're doing really good, and 2025 is going to be something even better. So please like, subscribe, check us out, and share with your friends. And as always, folks, I will see you on the other side. Bye-bye.